The 7200 is arguably the most versatile lens ever created for photography. Many pros and amateurs alike use the 7200 to get a specific look to their shots. In today's video, I'm going to be talking about my own experiences with my 7200 and nature photography specifically. This has been a great lens for my nature photography, and today I just wanted to make a video kind of sharing my thoughts on what the lens allows you to do. I will be showing you some of the limitations of the 7200 for nature photography, as well as what kind of shots it allows you to get for your photography. So let's just start with some of the disadvantages of using a 7200 for nature photography. Now keep in mind, I am in no way bashing this lens. I have used this lens for probably 40% of all my nature photography shots, and I really enjoy the results I get from it. The lens I use in particular is this guy here, the Canon 7200 f4 LIS. It is a very old lens. It is from 1990, I believe, but it still works very, very well. I have an EOS RP, so I use it with the EF to RF adapter, and it works perfectly. This lens autofocuses insanely fast and allows me to get really good shots at 70 and 200 millimeters and at the focal lengths in between. So like I said earlier, I am not bashing this lens at all. It's a great lens, great image quality, great everything, and I'm just going to talk about some of the limitations. One common misconception with this lens is that 200 millimeters is a very long focal length. When you do compare it to, say, a 24 millimeter lens, it is very long, but it's not as long as you think, and you should temper your expectations before buying the 7200 because you might be a little bit disappointed. Not that I'm ungrateful for the lens or anything, but I was a tad bit disappointed with the length of the lens when I first got it myself, and I don't want that to happen to you. In nature photography, there's many different subgenres you can do in this field. You can do flower photography, bird photography, landscape photography, and I do all of those. I have found that the 7200 is more than acceptable for landscapes and macro shoots. In fact, it excels in these two genres. Where it comes short is the nature bird photography part of nature photography. And like I said earlier, 200 millimeters is not that long, and when you're trying to shoot a small songbird, you will not be able to fill the frame with it at all. In fact, you will get a very, very wide shot of the bird, which can sometimes be undesirable. I know that many wildlife pros say that you can get any shots with any lens when it comes to wildlife, but I really do think 300 millimeters is about the lower limit for what you can get with birds. You do have to get extremely, extremely close to the animal to do this. I've gone on many dedicated bird photography shoots, and I've only got one shot where I felt good about the amount of bird that was in the frame. And as you try to get closer to these animals, they tend to run away very easily. Although the 7200 is a great lens, I would not mistake it for a wildlife lens. It is a great portrait lens, flower lens, landscape lens, but not a great wildlife lens. It is still usable though. The way I get around this, if I want a nice close-up shot of the bird, I go into my camera's menu on the EOS RP and I turn on the 1.6x crop. This is a destructive crop, which is fine for me. It reduces my 26 megapixel sensor down to 10 megapixels, which is not a lot of resolution, but for Instagram it's fine. And it allows me to get a little bit closer to the bird. But this is not a substitute for a longer lens because I still find myself needing a little bit more length sometimes, and the quality does not look the greatest in the world. Although 200 millimeters is a bit short, excellent results can be achieved. Like I mentioned earlier, you can turn on a crop mode in your camera or just crop in your editing software, and you can still get usable results with this lens. 200 millimeters has taught me something interesting about a bird. If I started with a longer lens, I think I would focus more on getting way in close on the birds. But 200 millimeters has really allowed me to show the wide scene around the birds. And I'm going to show some examples over here. So let's go ahead and jump over to the computer. So as you can see, these photos do not get the closest in on the bird in the world, but you still get a nice shot of the bird, and you kind of capture the wider scene around the bird. Now, of course, you would like to have the ability to zoom in to these closer focal lengths, but on this camera and with this lens,
you show the wider scene around the bird, which I think is pretty cool. It's nice to see these branches, some of which were in focus, some of which aren't. It's just kind of a cool shot. Here's another example. This is one of my favorites. You have this kind of chaotic branches, and then you have this cardinal in the middle, kind of providing a nice color contrast for the scene. And if I was on say a 150-600, I probably would have zoomed in right to 600 millimeters and just focused on this bird and not gotten this cool wider scene around it. And another example is this deer here. I would have preferred to be close in on the deer, but I captured this wider scene around it. And for some of you, you may see that as a negative. Others may see it as a positive. It's just up to you, your personal style. Here's another one where I captured a nice wide scene around the deer. That is my examples for the wider scene shots you can get with a 70-200. I'm going to throw it back to the desk now.
The 70-200 is also a superb lens to shoot macro photos. Although there's not a very close focusing distance at 1.2 meters, you can still get some amazing shots of flowers. I have owned a good amount of lenses, and especially in the beginning I shot a lot of flowers. I've never shot on a better lens than this for flower and macro photography. This lens allows me to really narrow in on a subject and get that nice blurry background at 200 millimeters and really compress the scene down and get beautiful colors, beautiful sharpness, beautiful everything. So if you're a macro photographer, you don't need to listen to the macro lens stuff. Just buy a 70-200 f4 or f2.8. It doesn't really matter because you shouldn't be shooting at f4 or f2.8 for macro photography. Just buy one of those lenses and you'll see how great of macro photos you can produce. I have gotten some portfolio worthy shots with this lens for macro photography, and these pictures will definitely stay in my portfolio for a long time, and I will always remember the amazing lens I used to capture that. In conclusion, although the 70-200 has many shortcomings, you can still get some great shots with this lens. However, I suggest you pair this lens with a longer lens. So, you start with the 70-200. I would get that first, especially if you're more focused on landscapes and macro like I am. And then maybe later on or at the same time, purchase a longer lens, possibly a 400mm prime. I know if you're a Canon shooter, the 400mm f5.6 seems like a good option. I might be purchasing that soon. Or maybe a Tamron 150-600, or something that you can use as a dedicated bird photography lens, because those longer lenses can be really heavy, and by using a 70-200 you can have a fairly compact telephoto lens to take on trips and stuff. So instead of just getting a long lens, I suggest you have a 70-200 and a longer telephoto lens. You could get the 100-400 or anything like that. Just get a longer lens if it's in your budget, of course. You could also use a teleconverter, but there are many negatives to using this, but you could definitely do that as well. The 70-200 has allowed me to get some great shots for my nature photography. Though it has many disadvantages, I still think that the advantages highly outweigh these disadvantages. I suggest you purchase this lens if you are serious into nature photography. It will allow you to get some great shots and really redefine how you look at a landscape.